simply, we've read this so many times, it's Acts 2:42 through 47, carries all the elements of God's purposes for the temple that I just went through. Spiritual resources, healing resources, material resources, and relational resources. Acts 2:42. They were, they were continually devoting themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship. So right there in the first verse, you get learning. To the apostles' teaching and to fellowship, to the breaking of bread and to prayer. And everyone kept feeling a sense of awe. And many wonders and signs were taking place through the apostles. Translate that, people were getting healed. And all those who had believed were together and had all things in common. Well, now you've got resources, because it says they began selling their property and possessions and were sharing them with all as anyone might have need. Day by day, continuing with one mind in the temple, breaking bread from house to house, they were taking their meals together with gladness and sincerity of heart, praising God. And because it was visible, because the world could see what was going on, the next line says, and the Lord, they were having favor with all the people, and the Lord was adding to their number day by day those who were being saved. People aren't going to get saved by our gospel presentation on a street corner. They're going to get saved because we look like the temple with all four of those resources available. Spiritual resources, healing resources, material resources, and relational resources. God's blueprint for the Old Testament is the blueprint for the New Testament church. It's all there, except the New Testament kind of adds one more layer. In the New Testament, it's not bound up in a physical building, although this physical building gives people an identifiable place to come to. The temple now, the place where God chooses to dwell, is a temple not made with hands. 1 Peter 2, verse 4. And coming to him as to a living stone, which has been rejected by men, but is choice and precious in the sight of God. You also, as living stones, are being built up as a spiritual house for a holy priesthood to offer up spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God through Jesus Christ. But you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for God's own possession, so that you may proclaim the excellencies of him who's called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. For once you were not a people, but now you are the people of God. You had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. The issue of the temple is just as precious to God today as it was in the days of the Old Testament, because the temple, the church, is his chosen instrument to show and give his love in this world. Somebody tells you that God has given up on the organized church, you know that's a lie from the pit of hell. The church has always been and always will be God's plan for this world. The only thing that's changed is the outward form of the temple. See, the temple always was the visible proclamation of who God is. The difference in the New Testament is that we as a people are the temple. We are the visible proclamation of who our God is. Together, we are the place where he chooses to dwell. And that makes this temple more significant than the Old Testament temple, because we are the living stones that make up the structure, and so the Father's love is more manifest in the world. His vision for this temple is the same as his vision for the Old Testament temple. And it is that there would be among us spiritual resources, material resources for caring for people, healing resources, and relational resources. So to go back to Haggai, God told them they were poor. He said, you're miserable. He said, you're nothing working for you in your personal lives. And he told them why that was. He said, it's because the house of God lay desolate and neglected while they were absorbed in their own homes and their own needs and their own resources, their own concerns. And they wanted to settle the issues of their own households before they would devote themselves to God's vision for them together, and it wasn't working for them. How many of you know if you want to work your own plan, it ain't going to work? You want to work God's plan, things are going to fall into place. You know, God has always asked for first fruits. You track that through Scripture, always first fruits, not leftovers after we've taken care of ourselves. What if the only gifts that you and I received every Christmas were hand-me-downs? How would you feel? Like if I went scrounging through all the rummage in my closets to find something to give to my daughter, wrapped it up and gave it to her, and she took it out and it was used, something old, how would she feel? Unless it was one of my $5,000 guitars, then she might be happy. But you understand? How would we feel if somebody was giving us gifts and it was leftovers? It was, hand-me-downs. Shouldn't the gifts we honor God with be the first and the best? Not what's left over after we're done?